This week, we're going to turn our attention to what I call single solution NGOs. Not all NGOs are the same. We looked at holistic ones, a couple of region modules before, and then we talked about international governmental organizations, many of which are also holistic in nature. But there are a lot of organizations that aren't really as holistic in the work that they do. And these are NGOs I call single solution NGOs. They're focused on one particular need, and they usually employ expertise in one technique or one type of solution to deal with that particular need. What this allows these NGOs to do is bring the full weight of their resources on that one solution and that one problem. Now, in many situations, these single solution NGOs start to blend into holistic approaches a little bit. And in fact, the one that I'm going to give as a main example to you a little bit later is an organization that does that somewhat. But the reason why organizations tend to focus on single solutions, or at least some of them do, is that by working on just one area of development, these organizations are able to have a lot less overhead, fewer staff, they have more program opportunities, and a lot less bureaucracy. When you have a really big organization like Heifer International that we talked about before, that's doing a lot of different things, you need a lot to support that staff. If you're just doing one single thing, it's much easier to do that. Another thing that's really important about single solution NGOs is that they tend to produce results that are a lot more measurable. You can collect data very easily from the work that they do, usually because they're focused just on that one thing. So it's easier for these organizations to prove the success they have. And that opens up the world to all sorts of different grant opportunities that they can have, grants that might come from the government or from other organizations. So let's look at a couple of examples of these, and there are lots of examples out there. These are just a few that I'm familiar with, some of which have really good results. The first of these is an organization called Against Malaria Foundation, which is rated by some organizations to be one of the most effective NGOs in the world. All they do pretty much is distribute bed nets to reduce malaria deaths. Now, what bed nets are these nets that kill insects and keep mosquitoes from landing on people while they're asleep, because most malarial mosquitoes do their damage at nighttime. So if you can get a family sleeping under a bed net in a malarial zone, you reduce the incidence of malaria greatly, and you can also reduce particularly childhood death by malaria. And then you can go on and measure these things. You can see how the nets are being used. You can measure the number of malaria cases and the deaths due to malaria, and it's very easy to show success. And the Against Malaria Foundation has done a great job doing that, because all they focus on is bed nets, and they also often work with partners on the ground. You know, when you donate money to the Against Malaria Foundation, that virtually all of that money goes to the bed nets. Another organization that does single solution stuff is called the World Toilet Organization, which might sound a little bit like a joke, but this is an organization that uses a kind of social entrepreneurship, something we'll talk about a little bit later on in the course, as a way to get more toilets being made around the world. As we know from the theme material in this particular region, there are lots of people around the world who don't have toilets and who have to defecate in the open. Well, this is sort of like a business opportunity for people. They can sign up for a franchise, and then the World Toilet Organization helps to train these folks how to build toilets and how to make them successful operations, businesses, so that more people have access to toilets. Toilets is all they do. Deworm the World is another single solution NGO that has great success. And as the name of the organization implies, what they do is they distribute deworming pills to schools throughout many parts of the developing world where worms are an issue. And worms are a big issue, not just because, of course, they make people sick, but they impact ultimately educational attainment and even income levels and things like that. But by focusing just on these pills, which, as you can imagine, are very cheap when distributed in mass, they can do a whole lot of good. Now, there's one organization in particular that I wanted to point your attention to because it's focused so much on water, which is, of course, the issue for this particular region module. And that's an organization called Charity Water. It is by no means the only organization doing water development. There are lots of organizations that do it. But Charity Water is a really good example of what is mostly a single solution organization. They work with local partners who are already on the ground in countries that need better access to water, that have infrastructure in place to do things like drill wells and build basic sanitation systems. And so when you donate money to Charity Water, that money goes almost directly to well drilling and other projects, and then the active monitoring of the success of these projects as well. As you can imagine, an organization like Charity Water, because it's letting partners on the ground do most of the work, has a really low overhead. And so what that allows them to do is give money to organizations on the ground so that when a donor gives their money, they know it's going directly to drilling a well or to providing a sanitation system or something like that. Because of this, Charity Water is really able to demonstrate quite clearly what its reach is. They're active in 24 countries with 25 different partners, and they have funded over 23,000 projects as of 2017. They've impacted over 7 million people, and in the work that they do, 89% of all the dollars raised goes directly to projects. And that is really important for an organization like Charity Water because it helps them to get a good rating by the organizations that rate charitable organizations. And they are consistently a 4-star organization, which is the highest rating, not only for their financials, but also for the transparency that they use in showing what work they've done and allowing people to monitor it themselves in addition to the monitoring that they do. Now, there are some critiques of Charity Water, just as there are for all of these organizations. And some of their critiques actually go down to sort of the qualitative nature of what they do, which is sometimes harder to measure. Things like, what is the nature of the partners on the ground and how well do they use money? Or how are the water improvements being made having an actual effect on the people on the ground? You might have given new water sources to 7 million people, but did it necessarily help their position over where they were before? So these are all critiques that are important to make, not just of this organization, but many other organizations as well. Now, I wanted to leave you with one final single solution organization, a very interesting one and a little bit controversial as well. It's an organization called Give Directly, and it has sort of taken single solution to its very limits. And it's argued, why should we pay someone to do something in the developing world when the people there have the solutions themselves? So Give Directly's solution to overcoming development problems around the world is to give money directly to the poor and to then monitor very closely the results of what they do with that money. And while you might think that some of that money is going to be wasted and that there are going to be relatively poor results from it, you'd really be amazed to find out how effectively that money is used by the people who receive it. There's some really impressive results that Give Directly is able to demonstrate, again, through quantitative data in particular. So these are just a couple of examples of these single solution NGOs. There are a lot more out there. You're going to look into them a little bit. This particular lecture and what I want you to do is look into some of these organizations a little bit more, and then also consider some of the stuff you learned in social science thinking to think a little bit about how we do measure the success of organizations.